feel free to, as I said earlier, opine. This is a chance to really, share, because the beauty of this council is we have a lot of different viewpoints, and they're all appreciated. So, welcome, welcome. Second, I want to say that even though this is the second time that you've sat here, the first time was interim. Okay, the honeymoon's over. Good job. I want to absolutely welcome you and say how delighted we are. It's going to be a wonderful relationship with the council. It's going to be wonderful for Massachusetts outfitter scene. I think you're going to do a great job. And we are here, and I think I'm going to speak for us. We're here to support you. That's really our job. And make you be the best executive director. With that positive note. Thank you. We'll start by approving the minutes, which are always sent out way in advance, which is much appreciated. So, are there any additions to the minutes?
Madam Chair, just a question about the tracking action items. The fifth item on number of clicks. Explore other useful metrics. What might those be, and is it realistic to track? Who's looking at our data? Or is it something that for now we just have to live with?
Well, I think we're at a turning point with respect to some of our ability to understand and sort of disaggregate things from looking at our data. One of the things on the agenda for today will be sort of a preview of our new website that has sort of enabled us to develop some more analytic tracking. And I think there are other sort of opportunities separate and apart from our website where we can maybe sort of look at opportunities to get some more qualitative data about who's using our information and how. So I think it's on the table. Sort of we have to sort of define the specifics of what is most useful for CHIA and of interest to this group.
Will we be able to learn in the crudest way how many people look at different online resources?
Yeah, and that's so to varying degrees, that's something that we are able to track today, and we're sort of only going to be able to sort of get at increasing levels of detail. So if that's of interest to the council, we can find a way to sort of share that back with you.
Whatever's available now. By type of data, individual sites.
So maybe clarification, it says that you're unable to do it for a given time frame. Is that the limitation? Is that it's not, you know how many clicks there have been on something, but not over a given time frame, and that's the level of specificity that isn't possible? I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I gotta phone a friend.
I always said, wait,
I think you might be talking about the Tableau embeds, and that in particular, because it's a third-party embed, we only have the metrics they provide. And they provide for the life of the dashboard. So with many other things, we can limit it by a start date and an end date, but for that, we can only look at what Tableau offers.
So that means, that's.
Yeah.
It would be great to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's easy.
Yeah, easy is good.
And I don't think it was really in any particular 3 months before we said it was just, is anybody using it and what are they using it for? Great, any other comments on them? Yeah.
I just have one small correction, and it's just an important one because I'm very careful about this. There's at one point in it that it says that I indicated that DOI has authority over self-insured plans and the PBMs that work with them. DOI only has authority over fully insured plans, and we were given the authority to have oversight over the PBMs that work with self-insured plans. So I just want to make sure that that's corrected because it's a very important point.
I thought you had the power to overrule Congress.
If someone wants to give it to us, we'll take it, but we don't have that.
We're working.
Any other comments? Do I hear a motion to approve? Second? Okay, we have to do this with roll call because we have people online as well. So Brent Benson.
Yes, approve.
Luci Kuski. It's
Yes.
Thank
Chikusha, yes, approved.
you. Troy, you have a choice. You can either abstain or actually approve as a person who wasn't at the meeting.
I'll approve.
Is Lois on? Yes.
I'm here for David Seltz and I approve on behalf of him.
Liza? Yes. Sarah?
Yes.
Adriana?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Jean?
I will abstain, I was absent.
Okay. Approved. Thank you very much. I call for, oh, that was my motion, thank you. This is one of my awkward things every year to do. So we every year have to nominate and approve a chair and a vice chair. This is your opportunity to volunteer if you'd like to run, volunteer if you'd like to do it, or if somebody wants to nominate somebody. But otherwise, it's up to the group. So I always open the floor for nominations for the office of chair.
I will nominate Faye Donahue.
Second.
Yes, third.
Are there any other nominations? If there are no further nominations, we can vote. And the results of this election are effective immediately. So do I hear a vote to approve the chair?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think do I have to call on everybody? I don't think so. I thought that was just the minutes. Unless you
legal counsel-
violently object, Wade. If you're following any.
Yeah. It seems skeptical.
We also have to go through the same process for vice chair. Our current vice chair is Eliza.
We nominated Liza.
Advice?
Willing to serve.
Yes, thank you very much.
Eliza is nominated.
Second.
Thank you. There is a call and a nomination. We will now vote. All in favor?
Aye.
And the results are effective immediately. You are now vice chair for one term.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, a year seems like it flies by.
Wow. Yeah.
Again, terrific. This is your really official first executive director's report. And I think you're going to start out in a very interesting way, which I appreciate.
Thank you, Faye. And again, I'm really happy to sort of be here. Newly minted capacity with working with all of you. And I will sort of apologize at the outset because I think at this meeting, I will sort of be speaking a lot more than I would otherwise like to. I think normally we make a great effort to have staff at CHIA sort of who are real line experts on many of these things here. Just the way that this agenda has sort of lined up, it's fallen to me. That is not my intention. So as we were preparing for this meeting and talking with Faye and Eliza, they both expressed that it might be helpful for the council to hear a little bit about how I'm thinking about initial priorities for leadership at CHIA. And so as it happened, as part of my interview process, the appointing authorities had asked that I put together like an outline of priorities for the first 6 months. And so I will begin this report by just walking through a truncated version of that presentation. And Alex, I don't know if we are pulling up slides or.
Yep, whenever you're ready.
So I think we can just pause here. So, as I reflect on CHIA, where we've come from and where we're going, it seems obvious to me that we're on sort of solid footing, that our statutory role, our core strengths, our mission, they are all sort of solid and should remain so. I think there's a real opportunity that comes with a change in leadership. As I'm sure all of you know, there's a moment to take stock and reevaluate and sort of sharpen priorities and make sure that the organization is prepared for what's coming next. So as I think about priorities for 6 months and beyond, I want to make sure that we're being ambitious, but also that we are sort of grounded in the day-to-day realities for CHIA. And so to that end, next slide, please, Alex. What we have here is a non-exhaustive look at sort of what the next 6 months look like for CHIA. I think the specifics on this slide matter a lot less than simply trying to convey that there's a lot that's riding on the organization now. And so as executive director, I am committed to making sure that none of this slips through the cracks. I think that's sort of priority number one. And I feel confident in the ability to do so, having built many of the operating models that we employ here. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we are really sort of like being thoughtful and being strategic and trying to look for the openings to sort of add value here. So we could go to the next slide. So to do that, I've got 3 priorities that I think are all reinforcing and sort of rise and fall together. So building trust and reliability in our data operations, making sure that our analytic capacity is really pointed at the highest value policy questions, and then making sure that we're doing this work in concert with the people who depend on it. Next slide, please, Alex. So data operations is maybe sort of the most foundational for CHIA, but I think it's also perhaps the least understood. So efforts in this area, I think, are really all about reducing friction so that data can move responsibly and efficiently in and out and around CHIA. And so there are sort of 3 parts to what I want to talk about. Security, time out the door, and then sort of time in the door, or the experience of submitting data to CHIA. So next slide, please, Alex. Okay, so data security. To put this in sharp relief for the council, all of your healthcare claims and utilization data live in various unconsented databases at CHIA. 3.5-year-old son's data is spread all across data. So I feel a tremendous personal responsibility to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to safeguard that information. CHIA has historically really sort of prioritized investments in this area, and I'm very proud of the work that we have done to date to safeguard that information. But the threats in this space just continue to evolve, and so it is really critical that we try to stay apace with everything that's happening. And so to do this, I think the best way forward is to pursue a layered security approach. So not one big bet, but rather multiple reinforcing controls. And I want to start by sort of leveraging some work that Mike Kochi and his team have been doing to align CHIA with some of the best-in-class security standards. So there are 2 federal standards, FedRAMP Moderate and the NIST 800 series that we are sort of working toward complying with voluntarily. I think if anyone is interested in learning more about the sort of like practically or technically what this means, I'm happy to conscript Mike or someone on his team to talk much greater detail about this. But really sort of the thing that I want you to come away with is this is important because CHIA should not be in the business of coming up with a bespoke definition of what it means to be secure. Right? These are established standards that we can align ourselves in and sort of give ourselves the confidence that we need, that we are doing everything that we can to protect the information that we are entrusted to house. At the same time, I think it's important to sort of keep an eye on some of the more day-to-day threats. So, we sort of come at those through things like trainings, ongoing monitoring, compliance audits, really trying to build a discipline that ensures that wherever possible, we're avoiding some of the potentially avoidable errors. And I think those sort of smaller steps are also steps along the way to sort of getting toward those bigger goals of the federal standards. They're all sort of components of that. So Alex, why don't we go to the next slide? So that was security, time out the door. So the ability to sort of access data in a timely manner is like, that is essential to CHIA's ability to maintain relevance and have an impact. That's sort of like our business and our reputation on the line. We spent a lot of time at the last council meeting talking about an effort that had been wrapping up. We've been working with the legal office and the privacy office to streamline some of our data release processes. You might recall that we were sort of starting with an average of 240 days from application to time when data was going out the door. We want to get that in under 60 days. And so we're now in a place where we can sort of implement that. And, you know, I think this is sort of an area that I'm like really excited about, and you know, going to be sort of keeping an eye on. And importantly, we've done all of this leveraging HIPAA frameworks, right? And that's important because we don't want speed to compromise security or the public trust that we have. So Alex, if we could move to the next slide. So now talking about time in the door, this is really about sort of eliminating friction and the burden that reporting requirements impose on our data submitters. This is important because we ask a lot of them, and I think we owe it to them and to ourselves to do everything that we can to make these processes as simple and as straightforward as possible. And here, again, I think we have a lot of opportunity to promote efficiencies. So Mike and his team have been working on simplifying our core data structures so that it takes less time and effort for data submitters to generate submissions. We're also looking at opportunities to standardize things so that we can rely less on one-time or manual fixes. And, you know, this is really important because when data comes in cleaner, it can go out the door faster. So this is sort of reinforcing for the previous goal. And ultimately, that frees up capacity and time for what I think most people are looking for out of CHIA, which is timely analysis. And that brings us to the next slide. So priority number 2 is all about making sure that we are focusing our analytics on just the most important issues of the day. So if we could move forward. There are a number of new sort of statutorily driven reporting areas that we will be producing over the coming year. So we're working on new things around access and affordability, health equity, drug spending, and private equity in healthcare. These are all topics that I'm very personally interested in and want to make sure that CHIA has a really strong showing in what we produce. And so in order to do that, I want to make sure that, you know, we're gathering as much information as we can as we develop our plans and put together our proposals. Again, wanting to make sure that what we produce ultimately has utility. Also on this topic, I want to think about sort of like how we are releasing the information and serving that up. So, you know, are there different communication vehicles that we could employ that would better highlight key findings? Are there ways in which we produce our reports, you know, leveraging new technologies, things like AI that again would unlock additional capacity and productivity for us to focus more time and attention on sort of some of the emerging areas that we want to focus on. I think that's really sort of my last goal under our analytic agenda. It's just making sure that whenever possible, we are doing everything we can to try to sort of see where things are going, and that we are working to anticipate those emerging issues, and that we have something to say about them.
Andrew, what are some of the things that we could use AI in a secure way?
Well, I think we're trying to sort of like figure out what our comfort level is with that. But you know, I know we spend a lot of time sort of like torturing ourselves around narratives, around sort of producing some of these more rote reports like year in and year out. I'm curious as to whether or not sort of it could sort of help us generate initial drafts that we could sort of then build upon. You know, I think there may or may not be a possibility of sort of applying it to the sort of like analytics themselves. But I think, you know, again, I'm eager to sort of continue to sort of explore the possibilities, but, you know, we're trying to balance the fact that like our reputation is our trustworthiness. And so I think, you know, as we continue to explore that, we just want to make sure that like we're not doing anything that erodes the integrity of our analysis, and that we have a real handle on sort of how it is, like what the technology is doing, and that we're sort of comfortable with that. So this is an area where I think, you know, very candidly, we're trying to sort of figure out what the possibility may be. We certainly I'm eager to learn more about how others are thinking about this and using this, and how that might relate to CHIA's work. But I think it seems clear to me that there are opportunities, and they just need to be defined.
Do you think that participation in things like HCOG, like trying to tap into the emerging issues? I mean, I know some of those are repeat issues that we've talked about for years, but do you feel like your involvement or participation in those kind of forums is helpful in identifying emerging issues as well?
Absolutely. And so that's the sort of like the partnership sort of priority here, is that I think being involved in those discussions is one way in which, you know, I think it's clear that no one is going to sort of generate a list of like, here are the 6 things that CHIA needs to do. Like, my life would be a lot easier in some respects if that were the case. But I think, you know, staying involved, having an open ear, trying to sort of like spot those opportunities is sort of how we're going to identify where we may be able to add value.
That raises hand.
Brent.
Yeah, Brent.
Yeah, another sort of thought on that sort of line that's also related to the timely sort of producing analysis and analytics in a timely fashion. One way to also think about like that first class, well, at least the mandate-driven publications, things that have to be done over and over, is like to think about things as data pipelines rather than sort of like a hand crank process where the data comes in and you put a bunch of people on it and they produce a bunch of analytics, but to try to sort of set things up and AI can help with this kind of thing as well, sort of building up those pipelines. So as the data comes in, it sort of naturally flows into the analytics, and you don't have to do a lot of like hand work to put them together. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, and I will just acknowledge that Brent has previously been very generous with his time, and a few years ago came in and spoke to the staff at CHIA about sort of some of the emerging AI opportunities. So, you know, Brent would love to continue the sort of discussion to get a little more specificity on what some opportunities might look like, given that a few years have transpired.
Great.
People here who have used AI in research on things that you're doing, that might be helpful for a conversation, not at this moment, but in the future. Liza.
So, looking forward to what you're going to be talking about.
The whole second hour.
No, I actually specifically, I think it's the legislative, sort of tracking, current legislative tracking. Is there a tension or, yes, there's a balance between, is the legislature or the statutory requirements that are coming through as looking as far ahead as what you're talking about and not overextending yourself into areas that
Sure.
As opposed to what you're being
Yes.
told,
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah,
your
yeah,
required
yeah.
scope is,
Right.
and how do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, that's very astute, like that we can't, again, I don't want to come up with our list of priorities in sort of isolation of other sort of realities, and I think that the legislative agenda is certainly one that we know is gonna be a valuable.
You're very popular.
Yeah. Yes. And so I think, we're not losing sight of that. I mean, I think maybe more of an art than a science in terms of like picking and choosing. But things like primary care, which I think we expect will be sort of like, the legislative priority, if not sort of one among a few, is definitely on our list of things that, we know we're not going to sort of stop talking about that for the foreseeable future. So that's already on the list.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's not as if the legislature has a better crystal ball than anyone else of the emerging trends. But they also set priorities for you,
Yeah.
so.
So, I don't know. So yes, there are two sort of groups that are working now, if I understand. There's the affordability group and then there's the primary care group. Both are supposed to be reporting out something in the next months. Which will presumably require data and analytics for the next few years.
Yeah, and I think, one way that we sort of avoid the sort of cross wires is just being very transparent about, what we're planning, and sort of, where we're anticipating to put the emphasis, in soliciting that feedback from stakeholders, just to, again, I don't think it's possible to perfectly align things, but to the extent that we can involve the administration and the legislature in conversations around sort of what we want to do. I think that sort of is only gonna, it only serves services us in the end in terms of making sure that we're walking in sort of lockstep with them. And so, Alex, I think that largely sort of, we've spoken to this, so I think maybe we can skip this.
Wait, no, that's your third.
Yeah,
No.
well, but I think all of this is, we do this, CHIA's work doesn't exist in isolation, right? All of our work exists to service sort of healthcare decision makers in Massachusetts. And so I think it's really critical that we maintain these relationships in order to sort of make sure that we are aligning our work with the needs of the people on the receipt.
So I understand these are the three pillars you put in front of the team.
Yes,
So this is your pitch.
yes.
I got you the job. And I think it was great to want to share with us. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so Alex, I think the next one is just sort of, this sort of brings this all together. Maybe we can sort of segue into some of the more standard area, unless there were questions
Yeah,
from.
no, I think it was a really good idea, frankly, to show us what you presented to the Attorney General, the Auditor, the Governor's Office, to say, here's my vision, which was obviously supported. And that's helpful. And I don't think anybody has a surprise. Any other thoughts on it? Hands up.
So at our last meeting, we were asked to sort of come back and share a little more detail about sort of what we're anticipating on the legislative front. So just as a reminder for this group, we are in the second year of a 2-year session. The formal session ends at the end of July. There is a precedent to having members called in over the fall to sort of close out any unfinished business.
New Year's.
But I think we can reasonably anticipate that there's going to be a flurry of activity between, like, over the next, call it 6 weeks. And so we're keeping an eye on more than 100 bills that invoke CHIA's name in some way. And I think there's like, it's important to note that there is a spectrum here, right? Many of these bills just stipulate that agencies or commissions should consult with CHIA in the work that they do. And then there are other bills that have much more of a bearing on our the data that we collect or the analytics that we produce. And so those sort of larger bills fall into these 4 buckets of primary care, healthcare workforce, PBMs, and hospital closures. The group may have seen that last week the Senate released an omnibus bill focusing on primary care. This would establish, sorry. Oh, I don't know.
I'm just looking.
This would establish a sort of a target for spending on primary care, and would make CHIA responsible for sort of defining primary care spending and then monitoring progress against that target in much the same way that we are charged with monitoring progress against the overall healthcare cost growth benchmark. So we are keeping an eye on this. I think we have heard from leadership in both chambers that primary care is, you know, the priority for this session. We're waiting for the House to release its proposal. There have been standalone primary care bills by both the Senate and the House, but no sort of corresponding House omnibus bill yet. So I think that's a development that we are anticipating and will be keeping a close eye on.
Other questions on this?
Is there any AI related legislation that you're tracking? I don't know if there's any that reference CHIA specifically, but I'm just curious.
I'm not aware that there is AI bills that are specific to CHIA. I'm confident that among the pile, there must be many, but I don't know the specific answer to that. These 100 bills are the, like, you know, that's just the ones that sort of mention CHIA or 12C. We do have a sort of broader tracking system that looks at sort of other sort of adjacent issues, you know, things that may sort of implicate DOI or the HPC or sort of have a bearing on sort of technology or data in healthcare in Massachusetts, but I don't know the specific answer to that.
I was just thinking because we're tracking it with everything going on federally and
Yeah.
you know, in states. So it's just one of our topics that we're keeping an eye on.
We can get you a specific answer to that. You know, so there are also a half dozen bills that we're looking at that CHIA is involved in around healthcare workforce. These would make additional investments in primary care and behavioral health capacity. They would broader provider recognition, so things like midwives and APRNs, as well as establish some new funding mechanisms that would try to deploy needed resources to underserved areas in the state. There are more than a dozen bills sort of looking to build upon the new authority in the area of PBMs. These would do things like impose stricter regulations on rebate pass-throughs, try to enhance patient and pharmacy protections through fair reimbursement models. They would impose anti-discrimination measures, as well as limits on patient steering to preserve access in choice. And then lastly, a topic that I know has come up before the council before, there are a few bills looking at hospital closures and trying to get ahead of that, and would expand upon CHIA's reporting and monitoring obligations there. So keeping an eye on this, and we'll continue to keep the council apprised of all developments that transpire between now and the end of July or the end of December.
This is a question.
On the last point, um, I think it would be helpful to CHIA's credibility going forward. If we follow the legislative language in chapter 224 on specifically identifying financially distressed hospitals. I think we've tried to finesse this in the past, but the legislative language is clear. And if Holy Family closes, if Haverhill closes, if Morton closes, there'll be another series of questions raised. And I don't think it'll be enough to say, well, Steward Ralph Deleterious refused to give us the data, even though we could have shut him down by the authority of 224. You don't give us the data, you don't get paid for your care. So I think that this is one of two important areas where candor will make for trust. And papering over things and euphemisms, and it's there, I don't think will continue to wash. But that's one view, and probably a minority view.
I know that this topic has come before the council before, and there was a sort of diversity of perspectives on, like, you know, there were concerns about market impacts around, or, you know, unintended consequences around some of this reporting. I don't know if there's been an evolution in thinking around.
I mean, it was not very long ago that we had this conversation, and I think the group was pretty clear that the benefits of doing so are outweighed.
So that's the past. I think what Alan's getting at is the new legislation. And is there a way, as we talk about it, to make sure that whatever's asked for in the legislation or developed is something we can actually do, or we have this power to do? I don't know.
So I don't know enough about what those pieces of legislation
just-
are to.
It might be helpful if somebody asked us.
You mean on the legislative side? Like encourage,
I think, you know, the past is the past,
yeah,
but we've got a group that's really concerned about it. If I understand you're saying hospital closures is one of the top four. And they're developing legislation around what to ask for, when to ask for, what are the parameters. Because we were constrained, obviously, in the past by whatever we could do. Now there's new legislation.
Potentially. And you know, and I think, I
In study years.
They'll study.
and I think I would say that, you know, this priority list is sort of CHIA's priority list.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
not sure that anyone in the legislature would say that sort of these hospital closure bills. I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know the likelihood of any of them sort of actually
Who knows what
making it
happens?
through.
And I don't, so I maybe I haven't been here long enough, or I haven't been through enough of a legislative session. Is it the role of CHIA to guide legislation as opposed to react to it? And I think that individually members can go forward and talk to them about it, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think.
Don't agencies do it all the time?
I was gonna say, so I've worked on the legislature side, I worked on the
Right.
agency side. So we have to go through certain protocols to
Yes.
get that feedback, obviously, working our way up through the secretariat. GIA is a little bit of an exception to that, right?
Right.
And so I think just fostering those relationships with the committees, so healthcare financing, I think continuing to have those conversations with them. GIA would get insight into what their priority is coming from leadership, but then also have the potential to impact that priority list.
So, but I think it comes down to not knowing enough about what the bills are and, you know, whether that's, whether there is even a place to have that conversation.
We do have some people that are very smart about collecting health information, financial information. So hopefully somebody would ask.
Yeah, and you know, we typically sort of look at these things and where we are, I think where we are comfortable sort of like advocating is, you know, we will share with sort of like the legislature when something is like an impossibility, like when we've been told like, you know, do this thing that we cannot realistically achieve. But that has really been the line that we have drawn, and otherwise have sort of deferred to the wisdom of the legislature on what the priority should be.
Well, recently there was one Globe story, and I don't know that we want the Globe to set policy, but about Good Sam and St. E's. And one fairly careful healthcare expert said they were bleeding money. BMC was bleeding money. Do we retain specific financial reporting on the 3 BMC hospitals? Or will they be submitting one combined overall financial report?
We will get them from the individual hospitals as well.
Going forward.
Yes. Yes.
Great. But I think that under the question of making policy or responding to policy, I'm concerned about possibility of legal challenges to our work if we fail to identify financially distressed hospitals as the law calls.
I'm worried that if you end up in legislation and they're saying, please study these 4 things, and you go, even if we could do it, it's useless. Here are the 4 things you really should have asked for. So it's interesting as you're participating in the conversations. Anyway, those are very big impacts on us if they really come out with something that requires a lot of attention.
So we will continue to keep an eye on this. We'll sort of report back as things sort of unfold coming weeks to months.
And you may not know this, but is there anything coming out of the affordability discussion? Could impact you? I know you probably can't answer because it's not.
Yes.
Okay.
You
know what I asked? I know.
I do not know the answer.
But it's
to
a
that.
possibility.
Yes.
You heard it here first situation.
I didn't think that. I think I just put it out there as something that might be something.
It again, as Kara said, like these
That's
forums are areas where we are sort of, feverishly taking notes on sort of things that may be, either directives for CHIA or opportunities for us to show value. So, it may or may not translate into a direct ask, but if we see an opportunity, we want to make sure that we are sort of doing it to sort of be there.
I also want to just commend, because there's been opportunity, like the number of folks on the affordability working group, and then we've got subcommittees that we're running. We've had folks from higher ed, researchers, cross stakeholders on these groups, and CHIA, there's been opportunity for collaboration and assistance from CHIA, and Andrew and his team have been really supportive of that. So I just want to commend folks for that, because that's part of what's going into the decision process here.
I just wanted to circle back to Alan's last point, and I guess this is a question for you, Alan. It struck me that your comment is really independent of the pending legislation about hospital closures, right? You're referring to chapter 224.
And in conjunction with the growing legislative concern with hospital closings.
Okay, so it's in combination. It's not that CHIA is not currently meeting what was in chapter 224.
Well, that's my belief, that we are not, but that's clearly a minority view. But I'm concerned that that will come back to bite us. Thank you.
And thank you for clarifying. Other things on legislation? Do you want to talk about right now?
And from my perspective, unless there are questions, we can sort of move down the line here.
I think it's really important and it was asked for, and yeah, let's keep it on the agenda. It's such a moving target.
Great.
Forgive me, Madam Chair, I can't hear you.
And you know what? I've been told I mumble.
You don't mumble.
I said, I think it's great that it was asked for by the council to have a broader update on what's happening with legislature. And we need it every single quarter because it's such a moving target. Who knows what might come? Okay, budget also.
Yes, so between now and the end of the legislative session, we will face the end of FY26 and the start of FY27 on July 1st. This too is a date that sometimes has historically moved, but I think there's an appetite to try to have the next fiscal year's budget sort of reconciled by that July 1st date. So since last we met, both the House and the Senate have released their budget proposals. The House has sort of come in slightly lower at $32 million for CHIA. The Senate at 32.9, which matches the governor's recommendation in her House 2 proposal and our ask. I think we feel like we are in sort of a relatively good position going into this negotiation. We are sort of waiting to hear more.
And if you get 900,000 less, that, right, that's the math. Do you have a plan?
Yeah, well, I think the 32.9 is like our all-in number
okay,
here.
okay.
Like we have put like, I mean, there's nothing untoward there, but that is sort of like, there are some things that if needed to like defer into the following fiscal year, we would be able to sort of work within that number. Ideally, we're continuing to advocate for our sort of like to be fully funded, in part because that $32.9 million, which I think we talked about last time, represents a 3.6% decrease from our FY26 appropriation. Some of that was associated with the end of long-term capital debt repayments, one-time expenditures, and just like a continued eye on operational efficiency. And that's something that I'm very proud of, that we are sort of in these uncertain financial times able to sort of be judicious in our ask while also fully funding the agency. So yeah, we're hopeful, but I think in either scenario, we feel like we're not concerned about our ability to be effective. Okay, that is the budget update. Okay, I know we also talked about this a bit last time, but as a reminder to the group, pharmacy benefit managers doing business in Massachusetts are now required to comply with a licensing process overseen by the Division of Insurance. A subset of licensed PBMs are required to submit data to CHIA on drug pricing, utilization, as well as sending us copies of their formularies. This data was due to CHIA on June 1st. This is a first time data collection, and I think we are all very happy with the compliance that we've had and the cooperation. So there were 36 PBMs who were covering Mass residents in private commercial insurance. 33 of them have sent in their data. We've been in touch with the 3 who are outstanding, and we have granted them extensions for a few weeks. So we feel like that information is going to be coming in very shortly. None of the 3 outstanding PBMs are sort of the large 3 players in the market. So we've got sort of the vast majority here. Next steps in this process is for us to go through and start doing data quality assurance, and ultimately we are working toward an October date for our initial analysis based on this.
Technical question, please. Considering only the 3 large ones, you mentioned formulary. It's been my sense that there are hundreds of formularies. How do they respond to questions about formularies? Hundreds of formularies for one PBM.
Yes, yeah.
Can speak to that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
We asked the PBMs to take their most common formularies for Massachusetts resident contracts and then attribute how many members that formulary applies to. And so we basically set a minimum threshold. We don't necessarily want all of their formularies. We want the formularies that are most representative. And then I expect what we'll learn in year 1 is what type of variation exists among those formularies, and we might even be able to either I think further condense what we ask from them, or possibly ask for the full slate in future years. I think this year is kind of a learning exercise.
I have in mind some of the questions that come up about prior authorization, where one recent study found that the requirements for prior authorization among different payers are all over the place. And we know that unreliability means it's not valid. So I think this could be a very powerful topic.
Yeah, we're very excited about digging in the data, and as of this morning, we actually have the 3 remaining submissions in.
Oh,
So
wow.
we have 100% compliance.
I have a related question, which is, so you only require this of PBMs covering Massachusetts residents with private insurance, but are the formularies only for private insurance, or are you getting formularies for other payers as well?
For this year, we just focused on the private
Okay.
insurers.
Okay, so again, we'll continue to keep you apprised as we work toward that October publication. So if we could go to the next slide, just very quickly here, being mindful of the clock. We have recently produced a number of reports on primary care and behavioral health that sort of are advancing our insights in these important areas, and would encourage the council to spend some time looking these over to the extent that they are of interest. Okay, that was the better part of an hour on.
Nope,
These-
we got it. We're gonna have enough time for the next. Is there anything else in the chat?
No.
Any other questions for the executive director's report? Okay. Thank you. Website redesign.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Lonnie Herrick. I'm the Director of Communications and Content Strategy. I think I probably have the most fun and light topic on today's agenda. We can go to the next slide. So, as I'm sure you've heard over the years, it's been probably 10+ years since our last website update and enhancement. And so we kicked off last fall with the execution of a statement of work with our outside vendor Rheingold to rebuild and redesign our website from the ground up. And this was truly a cross-agency project. We had involvement from, with vendor selection, contract execution, discovery, design phase, site development. We're so close to launch right now with teams across the agency. So our 3 main goals were the navigability and usability of the site for visitors, design updates to enhance the visual appeal and meet the accessibility compliance regulations in Massachusetts. In addition to functionality updates for improved content management, this is, would really, I think, both cut down on the amount of time we'd have to spend internally on updating and maintaining the website, and also even let us do more with it in an easier fashion. And so in brief, we wanted to make it a better experience for both the front end users who are the site visitors and the back end users who are those of us in the agency. So we are anticipating that sometime next week, we'll be able to share the test site for review. We're still very much in the throes of content migration, bug fixing. But I do have some screenshots that we'll go through that give kind of a high level overview of what things will look like and what we're trying to accommodate. So again, the caveat, if you spot any little things on these screenshots, just have faith that we will fix them. All right, next slide. So I understand these are small. I'll kind of walk through the elements on each page. So this is our new homepage. It's a mix of static and dynamic elements. The carousel at the top will feature our most recent reports. So that's one of our dynamic features, alongside obviously our agency name, and then a sentence that's kind of a branding statement for the agency, and that will be more static. Then the body of the page, we're highlighting, I'll show this in more detail on the next slide, but at the top there are 4 main navigation areas. And so these sections on the page are highlighting each of those areas. So the turquoise boxes are the 6 topic areas that broadly all of our reports and releases fall into. There are subtopics under those, but these are kind of the top level ones. Those blocks themselves are static, but they have a date and a number in them that are dynamic. So as we add new publications and releases, it might say, healthcare costs and payments, number of reports 7, last updated, and then whatever the date of the last release was. The white and orange boxes highlight our 5. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so if you click on one of the blue, turquoise, blue, I'm colorblind.
Yeah.
Does it take you then to that area and all the reports
Yes.
that are listed? Okay.
So if you click on one of those blocks, it would then take you to a secondary landing page that will break out either into additional topics or direct reports or a mix of both, depending on the area. Sorry to have missed that. Thank you, Anna.
No, I did.
The white and orange boxes are highlighting our 5 main data assets. We thought this was a great way to just show the breadth of what CHIA is collecting and working on. And those will each then link to a descriptive page that describes what information it takes in, what's the cadence, et cetera. And then the green box that you can kind of just see the top of will lead people to a subpage that will give them information on either requesting data from CHIA or submitting data to CHIA. And each of those then have their own fully detailed pages. And then the blue box, the dark blue box at the bottom, is our mission and history, leadership, oversight council, all of those things that describe just CHIA as an agency and how we operate. Next slide. So here we've blown out just one of the 4 menus. Our developers call this the mega menu. This one is the most mega of them. And so each of those lines will be clickable as well to go to a page. If you clicked, for instance, on analytics and reports, it would take you to a page that had those 6 turquoise boxes again. But so everywhere you go on the site, you can get to where you need to go. So hovering over each one will expand this mega menu. We've done this to make the content across the site more transparent and findable. Everything is listed in this hierarchical fashion. And then we do have the option on each of those menus to add call out buttons, which you can see on the top right. So anything we want to feature specifically. Next slide. I don't know if any of you have tried to use our current site search, but it leaves a lot to be desired. And so this is an example of the search results on the new site. They will show an excerpt of the page content that surrounds the search term you're using. So if you can't see the bolding, it's TME, and that was the search term that I used for this example. Okay, next slide. We will have a page set up for each different type of data submission that we take in, and there are different needs for each one, and we'll have the flexibility to change the page design based on, or the page elements based on that. But in this example, we have the overview and the submission deadlines right up at the top. And then those orange buttons on the right are all of the related documentation and guides that people will need to submit their data. Further down the page, it's hidden in this view, but where applicable, there will also be a call out banner highlighting the contact information for anybody who needs user support. Okay, sorry, another question?
So I'm just interested, if somebody's submitting and they submit every year and they have to do this, is there a way, I mean, they just have to bookmark this page, or is there a place on the front where it's like a login so that you know who they are?
There's no login on this site, but the cross-linking to CHIA submissions, if that is where they submit it,
It's a different site. Okay.
will be there. But there are also some data submissions that I believe are handled through submission to an email address, and that will also be prominently on the instructions on the page.
Mhm.
Okay, so on that last page, you saw the dark blue banner at the top, and that will be used across the site as kind of the typical page element, even on our report pages. But we also have a special layout that we can use for keystone publications, such as our annual report. And so in this case, we've brightened up the top with a white background and we can put in a graphic of our choosing there. In all cases, there will still be the overview and then the report materials as the orange buttons on the right. So all of the latest materials that get released will be there. Right below that, we have call out boxes for key findings in a more graphical format. There will also be an option to do a trended key finding as more of a timeline style. So we can have either single point or over time. It's not shown on here, but this is where the Tableau embeds will continue to appear. And then at the bottom, you can see there's like 2 gray bars, and that is our previous materials archive. So they'll still be fully accessible, but they won't clutter up the page. This also is an accessibility compliance option, because if they're archived, then we can look forward to fixing our future publications instead of spending a lot of time fixing our previous publications.
So, sorry.
I love it.
So when you click on a gray box, does it come up in the same format where you're having to go back and do the key findings, or is it just a link to go in?
Yeah, in those gray box, so the page will always be the latest information. But in the gray bar, you click it, it expands, kind of opens like a drawer, and then it will have the links to the previous years or previous cycles.
You're not having to go
materials.
back and regenerate all of this.
Correct.
Good.
Yeah, yeah, it would be a straight download. So it would link to, let's say, the 2026 report, technical appendix, data book, and any other materials we wanted to put in there. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, you can just barely see at the bottom, it says recommended links, but almost every page we will have the option to decide ourselves what the most relevant related pages are. And the reason we like this is because we know that on our current site, it's really hard for people to move around and find what they need. In this new site, we have things organized. For instance, we'll have the APCD submissions page, but there's also other APCD related pages. We do reports and analysis on that. So if you end up on the wrong, slightly related, but not exactly where you need it to be, at the bottom of that page will also be links to the other closely related pages that you can get to easily. So that's the quick wrap up. I know we are short on time, so I defer to the chair and vice chair about whether there's time for questions, but I can also hang around after the meeting and answer questions.
Does anyone have any questions? I'm not gonna cut, you have a couple minutes on us.
Okay.
Can I just make while people are thinking about whether they have questions, a statement on process? We, again, sort of consistent with that goal of like partnerships and relationships. I'm very proud of the process that Lonnie led, in developing the site and the schematics and sort of the architecture of this. It did involve, users both inside CHIA, but as well as sort of outside of the agency. We had a very robust tree testing process where sort of we really tried to kick the tires to make sure the end product was going to be something that was navigable and sort of made sense to the people who sort of come to the website to find that piece of information that we're looking for. So no guarantees, but I think we made an honest effort in trying our very best to build something that had some real utility.
Beautiful and useful.
Is there any language accessibility for the site? Does it?
Like an accessibility statement?
No, maybe I wasn't clear, sorry, like translation.
Oh, I see. We did not have that as part of the site now, but we have a long list of future enhancements. And we do have budget for maintenance and enhancements, and we'll be considering lots of things, but I'll make sure that's on the list.
Wow. I won't address the question of total in parentheses, but I'm sure that'll be mentioned somewhere. On the question of access and insurance coverage, CHIA has done enormously valuable work in going beyond how many people have plastic insurance cards stapled to their collar to barriers to actually using that. Will that appear, or will that be in the Tableau side? Are there data pertinent to that that would be listed under the access and insurance coverage, one of the 6 main topics?
Well, I think the organization of the content is still going to be very much driven by our analytic teams and what we're producing. So you'll find the same types of things on the new site as you do on the current site. But we are also hoping to expose more of it and make it more user-friendly. And so, for instance, the graphic key findings is a way to make that more engaging, but those key findings were also on the current site. Does that address your question?
Sure.
It really is. Thank you. And could you send out, sorry, apologize.
Oh, that's okay. I just, one of the previous questions made me think about accessibility standards and like WCAG 2.1 or 2.2. Is the site going to be apply one of those standards that it will?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, we are meeting. I think it's certainly WCAG 2 point something. I believe it's whatever one is required by Massachusetts right now, which I think might be 2.2 and looking toward 2.3.
Great.
I don't know if anyone else knows. And it's mobile responsive, like it's meant to meet all of the requirements right now and also be flexible enough that without needing a whole new site developed, we can expand it as needed and update it as needed as those requirements change.
That's great.
But 2.2 is not the font size.
No.
Definitely
Definitely not. It's reduced to like, it's so 30% of my screen.
Could you send out a notice to council members when it's live?
Oh,
We can take a look
absolutely.
at it.
Yeah. I might even send you the soft launch site to ask you to click around in it.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Sure.
And
Thank
I
you.
just want to reiterate what Andrew said. I mean, it was great to be approached and asked to talk about our, as at least the agency, our experience with it, and that we were giving input and really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, hopefully we met that, met your needs.
I look forward to seeing it.
Great, thank you.
And I just want to offer congratulations because I know how big of a project this is, and it really looks beautiful and it looks navigable, and really looking forward to playing around on your website.
Thank you, Lois.
Great, thank you. And we are pretty right on time. And all of the time and strategy.
I think this is maybe a sort of, we're in steep competition for the website, maybe the lightest discussion, but I think this will also be a fun and important discussion here. So Alex, we can move. So again, wanted to start just by sort of grounding this discussion in looking at CHIA's current strategic plan, and then really using the balance of the time to think about, what are the emerging sort of challenges and opportunities for our healthcare system, and get the feedback of the council and sort of how those might translate into data or analytic needs as we start to think about crafting our next strategic plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to remind the group, in the spring of 2023, CHIA developed a 3-year framework for guiding internal decisions here. We are now, at 3 years on, that coupled with the fact that we have a new executive director, happy coincidence, although maybe I should be thoughtful in terms of what I write as the sort of the duration of the next strategic plan. There's a natural sort of opportunity to start to sort of think about what the next phase of the plan should look like in Compass. Okay, so Alex, why don't we? Okay, so again, just to remind everyone, this is a very high-level overview of CHIA's latest strategic plan, which encompassed our agency mission, our organizational values, our priority areas, and then set forth 4 strategic goals. each of which had some tactics nested under those. We've been updating the council along the way in terms of our progress. We've been using a good amount of time at each meeting to talk about priority projects. And then we have had a couple dedicated sessions where we have talked about specific implementation progress. I think my general assessment of how we fared against our strategic plan was that we did a pretty good job. I don't know where we would fall on the letter grade curve. I think there were a lot of things that I feel like very proud of, but obviously there's, a part of why I'm excited to step into this role is that there's more work to be done. And so I think that's sort of the goal of articulating the next strategic plan. As I look at this slide, the values, CHIA's values feel like those seem pretty firm to me. The priority areas and the goals are perhaps a little more up for grabs. Again, want to make sure that this conversation is going to sort of help us understand whether we need to take anything off the list or sort of reprioritize things or collapse concepts or just sort of frame them in a different way. But really, I'm imagining that it's primarily sort of the goals and perhaps to a lesser extent the priority areas that we're thinking about modifying for the next strategic plan. Can we move to the next slide here?
You want to stop at that one?
Sure.
Go back.
Okay.
Let people think. I mean, I think people have
Yeah.
to look at it and think about
So I
it.
was wondering, is like now the time to talk about this?
People might be.
We may want to reconsider use of the word steward and stewardship. Just a thought, but also information, Massachusetts Health Information and Analysis. And how about equitable, affordable, and transparent?
So my comment is related. So maybe I should say it before you respond. Can I jump in?
Free country.
Please. Great debate.
And I think we've discussed this before, but health equity, I think we discussed it last meeting. I'm interested in your thinking around having equitable healthcare be part of the general mission as well as a priority area, as well as a goal. And I was actually thinking about, I believe Karen Sung was my predecessor in this seat.
Yeah, she was.
And she would always talk about like the swimming pool in which we're all swimming.
Right.
And personally, I feel like health equity isn't a priority area. I mean, how do you talk about it as being, you don't have health equity without workforce capacity, primary care and behavioral health reforms, access and affordability. Those are equity issues. And so I've been sort of mulling since we got the slides, like how do you frame this to say equity is the lens, is the bigger picture. And we're doing all of these things, and it may depend on how you define equity. But how do you structure it so that it's clear that the ultimate goal, is that it's different when you use it in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That means sort of a different thing there than it means.
Yes. Yeah.
So so that's related to yours, but maybe it wasn't entirely your.
Right. And no nation, no rich democracy has ever attained equitable access without affordability.
Right,
Or
exactly.
cost control without access. It's like they used to say about love and marriage. Anyway, that may be an antiquated notion, but equity and affordability are joined at the hip. And I think affordability needs to be in the introduction, the mission statement.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's hard because you don't want it to be in the mission statement and then not in your priority areas and goals. Sort of how do you, maybe you could build in, equitable access and affordability or something sort of that it's sort of reflected in those.
But I think we talked about last time how equity should be embedded in, it should be cross-cutting, not a separate category on its own.
And practically that sort of, like some of the boundaries around these things are sort of like porous and they do like bleed into each other. And so we have, certainly, I think we've sort of like, we've confronted the fact that like, yes, like all of these things sort of fold in on each other and equity is sort of a part of access and affordability and sort of vice versa. And so, yeah, I think there is, we've experienced that sort of like, just there's like a sort of strangeness in how we sort of like organize this stuff and give it some shape and dimension.
And I wonder, you know, from the legislature's perspective or from, you know, the government agencies' emerging priorities, if having, if the, you know, that their sense would be the charge for CHIA is the access and affordability, you know, is the sort of the concrete things, and so that it's not looking like you're focusing on something that without knowing what the definition of it is, you're prioritizing, I'm not being very articulate, prioritizing something over the concrete, like we need to address affordability. I mean, right now, that is the conversation.
Well, 3 years ago, it was a long time. So I different environment. I do recall that we were starting to embrace the concept of health equity. We really wanted to make progress in measuring it so that we can hold ourselves accountable. So I think that was the reason why it was under the priority. To some extent, we sort of graduated this concept and that has transcended, you know, to be a part of the foundation of what we do. So I do see some of this components going up, but then fill with priority areas that are a little bit more pressing today in a very different fiscal environment, and how do we think about system reform, things like that.
And it may be that access and affordability are two different lines, because access was about affordability and now access is going to be about something really different moving forward.
Would it be helpful to, I'm just thinking ahead to your next slide of biggest challenges, would it be helpful to have that conversation and then come back to addressing priorities? Because I think that'll help shape what we decide on.
We're be careful not to wordsmith. You're
I'm
right.
sorry?
Well, I think that's a great suggestion. Let's do it. And then come back, because I think I mean, if we need to be crystal clear on our mission. That's who we are. That's our soul. And the values that we have, and then you can, priorities will change over 3 years. So great suggestion. And this is one where everybody was forewarned and will participate.
Yeah, so you know, in terms of thinking about how we get started on this process, which I think is going to take, you know, some time to sort of just translate into a document that we sort of feel good about as a sort of the next strategic plan. You know, I want to thank Faye for encouraging us to think about like maybe starting this conversation by coming at like this from the sort of broadest lens of what do we anticipate might be, or what might we be staring down sort of in the coming months to years, right? And so what are those challenges and opportunities? I think many of them are pretty grim and dire and sort of necessitate like a very urgent response. But, you know, there are other things here that are, you know, also sort of positives, and, you know, like to sort of stave myself off from sort of despairing. I think it is important to remind ourselves that there are sort of good things happening here as well. But, you know, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just sort of like a starting point of like some of the things that we can either reasonably anticipate, and it's a matter of sort of the degree to which it manifests, or this is really just sort of to start people thinking about like what's coming down the line, and then from there, you know, what are the data or information needs that are associated with them.
Yeah, I'm going to add one thing. It's really easy now to start saying, oh my gosh, we'll have to do this. It really is just something that impacts CHIA in terms of the information we want to have in hand, the analysis that we would want to have so that we could hit the ground running if something happened. So we were all asked to think about it.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So are you saying that the first two are not challenges, but opportunities, positives? Because they do sort of stand out. It's
Well,
very different than theirs.
Sure, yeah, and again, this is a sort of our, just a sort of first pass at some of that.
I just didn't know if that was, if I didn't know whether when I read this, I didn't know whether increased reliance on artificial intelligence was a
I don't know,
Negative?
I don't know, I don't know. I mean, certainly I think sort of like 300,000 individuals losing insurance is like a profound negative.
Yep.
Investing in primary care, I assume is a positive, but may have unintended consequences. So all of this is an opportunity.
Right, so, and you're just throwing this out so people's brains could start working, so I want to start with you.
Yeah, well, I think even just looking at this list and talking with Commissioner Caldwell too, a lot of these things are inextricably linked, right? So one of the things that we've talked a lot about at HCOG and at other forums has been kind of the added cost pressures, and the rise in affordability pressures need to be linked both to the general increases in prices, so drugs and hospitals, but they also have to be linked to the increased use of AI. And the coding impacts, and we've discussed this multiple times, are really real. And we've seen some of that play out in HCOG and connecting with researchers. The premium and cost share increases are kind of these twin dangers that are thwarting the insured's ability to have, who have good insurance, from being able to afford it over time and wanting to use it in a given year. And then we're seeing the 300K individuals losing insurance. So from a DOI perspective, the cost, we really have to push for cost reforms, and that is linked to what we can do here at CHIA with understanding the data that's coming in and kind of finding the connection between these things.
A couple of things. In line with Eliza's point about the second, every relocation, retirement, death, or doctor going concierge in primary care throws 2,000 to 3,000 people in the search for somebody who is taking new patients, takes their insurance, speaks their language, and so on. So I think framing that as the continued slow but steady erosion could be useful. The 300,000 could be supplemented by people going from silver to bronze plans and otherwise facing growing exposure to out-of-pocket costs. More consequentially, we talk about crisis. And for people who lose coverage, whose doctor retires, goes concierge, that's a crisis. But I think healthcare has relied on more money for business as usual to sustain things as well as they've been sustained. But I think it's possible to imagine international challenges, recession, economic weakness, debt, loss of a dollar as the international currency, other social challenges, leading, say, 5 years from now to something like a federal freeze on Medicare, Medicaid, ACA, VA spending, massive hospital bankruptcies, patients losing insurance coverage or seeing their out-of-pockets go up so high that they have to do what the president says and borrow money for healthcare, and so on. So now that might be a small risk, small percentage chance that might happen, but the consequences would be catastrophic. So the product of the two means maybe we can think about preparing to respond to that crisis one concrete way. 40, 50 years ago, we had a Massachusetts Health Funds Flow project that in state government that tracked revenue by payer, where the money came from and where it went to which caregivers. Knowing more about that might be vital in guiding emergency responses to a thorough healthcare meltdown in response to the federal freeze and Blue Cross's reluctance to double premiums to make up for the loss of federal money. There may be areas we can think about, not just on the horizon, but over the horizon.
Absolutely. put that down. That was just, I think, an idea,
Mhm.
in terms of other ideas around the table. Great, Amy.
Yes, I'll just throw out a couple ideas. One thing I know is top of mind for Eliza, Rural Health Transformation Program, better understanding kind of the data around rural communities, challenges and opportunities there. Digging a little bit deeper than just county level analyses, but being able to differentiate between urban, suburban, and urban communities would be really helpful. On the financial sustainability piece, I think there's a lot of nuance and opportunity there. The endpoint shouldn't just be like a hospital failure or closure, but sometimes there are services that are cut, and you may not have that level of detail, but just recently in Central Mass, we've had another hospital close its maternity service, and that is one of many that has happened in recent years. So it's not just a complete closure, but important services that are being lost. I also wonder to what extent CHIA can assess the financial sustainability of other types of entities like FQHCs and behavioral health organizations. Again, in Central Mass, we've experienced the closure of both, and it's been difficult with no advanced warning that things were so financially challenging. So, if there are opportunities to think about how to work across agencies and maybe come up with creative dashboards that really kind of overlay the data that CHIA have with other agencies like transportation, for example, access to other services, that could be really informative as well. Thanks.
I just agree. Yeah. It's hard because sometimes we're so siloed, or if we're under different secretariats, but I really do think there's an abundance of data out there, and it can all link to things like SDOH and like wanting to improve all components of accessibility, not just where services are provided in a healthcare organization, but getting there and everything around that.
And I would add to that, I think, for instance, FQHCs everybody has to report to the feds, right? And so the UDS data for FQHCs give you an incredible wealth, a huge amount of data about what FQHCs are doing and seeing in their financials and quality and all of that. We're just making more work. And then, and then actually speaking about the rural piece, and there's a meeting I still have to set up between our teams, rural hospitals report totally different data to the feds that they don't report to the state. And so as critical access hospitals, and so, which I know nothing about, but I'm told this. So I think it's that kind of thing, to your point.
I have one sort of very specific point and one a little bit bigger. The specific point is that there is a growing housing crisis in the state, as across the nation. There is an increasing intersection between the housing shortage and setbacks in healthcare, everything. My organization serves a lot of homeless population, so housing feels like a gating factor for a lot of the healthcare specifics, and that used to be a smaller issue, now it's a much bigger issue. So I think that needs to be considered. The bigger question is, not the question, just the point is a little bit, sounds like Alan, but it's not really. But just not as much wisdom, but I feel like, the United States, Massachusetts certainly, the last few decades really built ourselves into a rich country healthcare system. That we have the privilege of having a lot of the complexity to try to be innovative and meet different pockets of needs. But we're kind of moving away from that. That privilege, if you will. We do have to deal with a fiscal dynamic where we simply just going to have to do more with less, even after this administration, and with lots of reasons that is macro, that we have to almost learn from poor country healthcare system, where they focus a lot more on prevention. They focus a lot more on avoiding duplication and coordination. They want to make sure that there is no bottlenecks, the system can flow. and all of those things. So I think the work that we need to do need to go beyond just looking at specific junctures, but looking at the entire system. It's a little bit like the resource planning work that HPC is doing, right? So if you look at one shortage, that may not be enough, you know, you fix one thing and what else is happening, you have to look at the whole continuum. So I think that's probably something that we should think about.
3 more concrete things. First, following up on that, our state has the least equal income distribution in the country, and our country has the least equal income distribution across rich democracies. How do we pay for care for everybody? Second, long-term care. Mess. Nursing home closings, lack of adequate substitutes, often overlapping with homelessness, often not. We have home and community-based services, but often they're just crummy nursing homes. Often they're very good, but it's not like we fixed the problem. We just moved it. And third, we're spending this year probably 145 billion on healthcare total, statewide. Half of that is wasted. Don Berwick used to be conservative and he said it was only 1/3. Now he says it's much, much more, meaning half, which is what some of us have been saying for quite a while. Theft is the smallest, high prices for drugs, administrative waste, no value, low value care. If we're going to make healthcare sustainable for everybody, well, social determinants of life matter. If healthcare keeps sponging up $10 billion more every year, there'll be less money, or maybe less and less money for all the other things we care about. So if we have the meltdown, going after the waste is the key to sustaining and protecting access and keeping caregivers open to deliver that access. So where's the waste? Can CHIA identify the literatures on areas of waste and opportunities to recycle the waste in the interest of equity and affordability when the political crisis demands that? Getting ahead of the curve, trying to anticipate things over the horizon.
I'm gonna ask people on, nobody's raised their hand on Zoom, so feel free, I am looking. Amy.
Yes, just wanted to throw another idea out there. I think to the extent that CHIA can help socialize a broader, more holistic understanding of health and healthcare, I think we would all be well served by that. You know, for example, local public health, community EMS, community-based organizations, they actually do some healthcare. Many have community health workers, vaccination programs, home visiting programs. And I know that's not like within the current mandate, but some of these data sources already exist through DPH. And to the extent that you can pull it all together, I think that can inform a broader understanding of health and healthcare and hopefully shift some of the investments upstream to more prevention strategies.
Nice.
So Alan already mentioned this, and I know it's already a major focus, but just in terms of, like, it may not be on the horizon, but it's here and for the foreseeable future is the workforce issues and particularly around, physicians and it's either a culture shift to focus not so much on physicians or being aware of what's happening with physicians. That's one. And the other is, and I'm channeling the governor's executive order 642, which is an aging population. And sort of what are the shifts we have to look at in those populations? So it's not just it's not just even HCBS and LTS, but in general, what does that mean for the system as a whole and its huge impact on cost and et cetera, and how much of a focus, and this is not within your bailiwick, but for all of us on, and planning for aging, planning for how we're gonna keep those costs down. And then the last one, which I think is may not be so much on the horizon, is what is the impact on your ability to collect data that's accurate from recent federal changes that are scaring people from not wanting to give any data, that are prohibiting state agencies from collecting, or, you know, anyone from collecting certain data, you know, all particularly around issues of equity and access. I mean, that's I think, a big and not going away challenge for all of us, and all tied together.
Combined with the Obama era cutbacks in NCHS data on caregivers, use of care by race and ethnicity, big
And when you,
cuts.
we had this I saw in the minutes, we had this conversation last time, when you say caregivers, you mean what I would call providers? Is that right, or do you mean more generally?
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I know.
I don't want doctors coming after me with a scalpel.
Exactly, yeah, so I think that caregivers for some of us means family caregivers as opposed to.
Thank you.
And you meant both? No, you meant providers
Well,
or families?
yeah, informal supports, family.
Informal and.
I say family and friends. Paid people we pay to care for us. It's called health care.
I would just add to that, you know, I mean,
Thank you.
long-term care insurance is not
Yeah.
traditionally seen as health insurance. They're two very different things. So just to echo the part about an aging population, but also how folks are going to be able to pay for things when they're not affordable. So it's everything from, you know, home health aides coming into your home, but also even the uncertainty around coverage when they are actually getting the care that they need.
Sorry, if I could just add, I would expand safety net far beyond the critical hospitals. The Commonwealth has a vast safety net that includes all of those agencies serving very, very marginalized people and families, from DMH, DDS, DCF, DYS. So those agencies are not market facing, so that's good and bad. In theory, they are sort of protected, but at the same time, they are, you know, in varying degree, completely out of touch with needs and challenges. So they are so sort of vulnerable to any and all bureaucracy that makes it very difficult for them to keep up with the needs to serve the most vulnerable. So I would really emphasize the measurement on how are we doing as a safety net for the Commonwealth as a component of this.
A lot. So I feel like, why am I asking for more? But I want to make sure we hear from everybody. Thank you, Brett.
So I agree with a lot of the big picture things in terms of access and affordability, and like the workforce shortages, especially primary care. And I think one of the things that's sort of CHIA specific, though, that I bring up a bunch is data that we don't have, and specifically self-insured and sort of the non-fully insured, and just what we statutorily don't collect in terms of all payer claims. So I think it's always important, as we're using that data to analyze things, that we try to model and sort of understand how are the people and the claims that we don't have access to possibly different than the ones that we have in terms of the analysis. So that's one other thing.
Really good point, because almost all players are moving as fast as they can to self-insurance. And you know that in the division of insurance, fewer and fewer. How much information do we get on Medicare? Yeah, every single claim, or do we get just those that are paid by Medicare Part B, Part A, Part D?
In the APCD, we only have the Medicare Advantage
Yeah.
Part B and Part D plans to the extent that they meet our reporting threshold. We have a separate data source, which is ResDAC, which is Medicare fee for service. That's not integrated with the APCD, but it is integrated at a person level that we can make connections between those two databases. So I would say, Mike, if you agree, we have a pretty comprehensive view. It just takes some analytic work to make those connections.
Yeah, and the only caveat to that is unfortunately the ResDAC data is severely lagged. We're just gonna get our hands on 2024 data for Medicare now, and that's obviously federally controlled, so there's nothing we can do about that.
Thank you. As we were talking so much about impact of aging, yeah. And lacks of data. So thanks for bringing up the lack of data. Anybody else?
I'll circle back to the AI thing. I think of the increasing reliance of AI as more of an AI arms race in healthcare. And I do worry that as hospitals face increasing financial pressures from the coverage losses, from the losses of federal funding, that they will turn to coding as a way to offset. And I think that CHIA is in a unique position to be evaluating that statewide in a way that few states are able to. I also think that in terms of the coverage and access disruptions, CHIA is uniquely positioned through both your administrative data, but also your surveys to be trying to capture where the coverage losses are bubbling up within providers, but also, uncompensated care, use of health safety net. And I think that that could be really instructive. And to the extent that you are able to comment at all on how people find their way back into coverage, there are a lot of states that are, trying to work with the laws and regulations that they have to minimize harms. I think that Massachusetts is well positioned to be a leader in this space, given the infrastructures we have. But for other states to be able to learn from Massachusetts, we need to be able to, document and show those findings.
Any other thoughts?
Key language on data security earlier. Why not a parallel to the phrase late Senator Kennedy used, health security, as part of our mission?
Okay, let's circle back to the other slide. Next slide.
That conversation makes 2023 seem like a cheery.
Actually, what I think it has done, and thank you for suggesting we do this, has made, when you sort of analyze all this 1,000-foot information, reflect on priority areas and goals. And I argue that we should probably rework the mission, I'm hearing, so tell me if I'm wrong, affordability and somehow cost, whatever you want to say, and maybe see if we can get it down to 12 words.
And I don't know if the priority areas are numbered in a particular way, but I think putting, as I guess it, not to wordsmith, but to put access and affordability, separate those out because they are now different issues and put them at the top.
Basically, just all the notes I'm writing, affordability has just kept creeping up on everything. Workforce has crept up a lot. And thinking about really good sort of scenario planning for what would we do if two of these things happen.
This may be too detailed, but access, financial coverage, and caregiver availability. And so those are positives. But we've faced such a negative, and both Jean and Amy have alluded to ways of things that suppress access to care. And I think looking at the negatives mechanisms and factors that suppress access to care, intentionally or unintentionally, may be worth looking at separately. The rise of out-of-pockets, movement from silver to bronze plans, losing the cost-sharing reductions in ACA plans, the looming threat of Medicaid out-of-pockets from Washington.
So we can use something to work with.
One or two things.
Fill those idle moments.
I mean, I was gonna say, and a lot of these things, I think this is sort of a event session. A lot of the things are totally not within CHIA's scope, but just to have to think about them.
They are, but I do think, and this is, thank you, we're not gonna solve the answer. What we're gonna say is, if that becomes the problem, and then as often they come to CHIA and say, what information do we who have to do something with this blankety blank problem need in order to solve it? And if we are prepared and thought about it, we can say, this is what you actually need. And we've got it.
And that's where looking at some of the negatives like waste or access suppression or mechanics like where the money comes from and where it goes could be three key areas of offering responses in a crisis.
And again, we're not gonna do it. Then you're gonna have to come up with priorities because you can't do everything. And it's good, some of these are long-term in terms of collecting data, like you were mentioning all the work in the community, or the idea that you had of, taking information from different places to be able to say, okay, here's the data to support that problem. So
Can I, just because you've used the word caregiver now, can I also add to Amy's comment that informal caregivers as a part of the healthcare system and what data exists around them, which is potentially not very good.
and maybe change, again, thinking, okay, just give you, as I'm listening, we won't know informal caregivers. Maybe now we have different questions when we ask employers and we ask people. Now, what kind of questions do we need to ask than we hadn't asked 5 years ago?
Right. I mean, the state this year, for the first time asked all state employees, are you a caregiver? And, of a child or an older adult or whatever, and they never asked that before.
Yeah, and I think it really highlights the importance of Jean's comment about taking a systems view, that it's not just looking at one particular issue, one type of entity, but thinking about the impact across the entire system. I don't know if that's more of an HPC thing, especially with the healthcare resource planning work, but I think taking a holistic view, assistance level view is really important. And that's where some of these like caregivers and community supports really fit in, because they are part of the entire system.
And then what we can gather here at CHIA, what's doable by other agencies, other, division of insurance or whatever. So this isn't, so I think that you're planning, if I understand, to reach out to places like HVAC over the summer as well and say, here, what are you thinking about that we might have to support?
If we talked about family and friends, informal supports is like insider baseball. Family and friends are like real words. So I suggest the value of that. And also family and friends and how to support them with paid and unpaid mechanisms like time banking.
Those are great questions.
I was just gonna ask, like, for coming up with this strategic plan, like, what's the timeline of that? Thinking about things like coming out of HCOG and other groups, Primary Care Task Force, maybe that will affect some of what's included.
Yeah, I think that's all to be determined,
Okay.
right? And so the sooner we can sort of identify the plan, the sooner we can move into trying to execute on that plan. There's a balance of sort of wanting to make sure we've got sufficient inputs and that sort of plans, reflective of.
Just couple of cents, my 2 cents here from the HPC perspective, just listening to this conversation and about, the looming existential, political, technological threats that that may impact the delivery of healthcare and access and equity in the Commonwealth. These are clearly sort of, problems across all of our agencies and not even just healthcare agencies, as has been mentioned. But what it underscores is just kind of, CHIA's role as hub of sort of data collection and sharing, and how important collaboration is going to be across agencies. And as people are mentioning HCOG, those whatever priorities kind of are identified in that process, how it's going to be so important for all of the agencies to work together with the data, with the analysis, and with kind of recommendations for action and then measurement. So just can't underscore the opportunity for collaboration enough.
That we very much see the role of CHIAs to provide the unbiased facts, the data, as various agencies, policymakers, et cetera, have to make decisions.
Oh, no, sorry, I was waving to someone outside.
Any hand above, any hand above shoulder height. We're in trouble.
This is the beginning of a process.
Yeah, and so, and I think whatever we build will need to, it can't be so rigid that it breaks when the first time we need to sort of like add to it or sort of pivot. So I think that will be an important principle that sort of, we incorporate as we sort of move forward. And again, I think this is the beginning of a process. We will want to sort of take this and sort of translate it into maybe a sort of straw model for this group to help us kick around further, and then we'll sort of finalize it from there. But I've got to sort of give some thought to like what a realistic timetable looks like. But certainly this is the first conversation and not the last with the council about this.
So this will be a major topic for the next couple of meetings, and then we'll sort of go down the funnel.
Yes.
That's great. In the last few minutes, I know you're dying to know why we didn't talk about dental this time. We didn't talk about dental, oral health. Next time, right?
Yes, yeah.
September.
Yes.
Data is coming in, still being worked at. Nobody used the oral health data, so it is a learning process, but it will be coming soon. I think I want to thank you for the update on legislation. That was a direct response. This conversation was great. I didn't worry that anybody would, hold back. So this was terrific. Thank you all. I think the other thing I heard a little bit about from a couple of people was AI. And since every board we're on is talking about AI all the time, in two ways. One is, how does it impact healthcare in a way that might impact the kind of information we're collecting? I mean, if somebody is using AI to talk to about their therapy, does that count as a therapist? I'm joking, but I mean, it's crazy. And then the other is, how do we use it? Because I think this is the kind of an organization that could really benefit and increase efficiency, repetitive, just a bunch of different things. But we have to go into it really carefully in the context of how the state is using it, what is available. We've got to protect our data beyond all belief. But there's a huge opportunity where we could do even more with the resources we have.
Speaking of tooth caregivers, do we have evidence from Alaska or Minnesota on the value of dental therapists?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's been there for 20 years.
Might that be a topic on which CHIA could provide information and analysis for the time when the political climate changes?
I'm only saying 20 years because I know that health policy, HPC did a nice study, I think 10 years ago now. So
yeah, maybe not that long, but quite several years, yes.
Yeah, 10, I think.
I mean, it seems a little different than CHIA collect.
Yeah.
CHIA collects data from elsewhere as opposed to.
What we
CHIA
can do is give them to do something with it, but we're basically getting claims at this point, but not a lot. So we can talk about it, but I don't think so. It's not our role to be.
Well, the data and analysis would concern how things have worked in other states. Whether there have been things like outmigration of dentists.
Again, I am, yeah, it's a good, so I'm sorry to stumble here, but I think about our role, correct me if it's wrong, for us is, we're collecting the information, providing the data. We have not yet gotten into, let's study what other states or other countries are doing. I don't think we have the capacity to begin to think about it.
It would be a matter of finding reports that they've done, not work.
I don't understand, but, yeah, but, to do a data search like that, somebody has to do it. So I know it took them a while at the HBC to do it as well. And it's a different thing, not our skill set. I'm speaking on behalf of the staff. I'm trying to protect you here.
I keep coming back to analysis.
But it's analysis, I mean, if I understand what you're saying, it's analysis of the data that CHIA is collecting, not analysis of outside data.
But there is an agency that does, called Health Policy. They did it. They do data, what's the word I'm looking for? Literature searches. Academic, maybe help me with this. Literature searches.
Literature reviews.
Yeah, we get a nice report that says, here are all the reports. Yeah. Okay. AI, both in and out. Is there anything else that anybody would like for the agenda next time? Do I hear a motion to adjourn? So moved. You want to stay?
Second.
And have a wonderful summer, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy the days. They're short.
Thank you.